Bloomberg Tech is live from coast to coast with Caroline Hyde in New York and Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Welcome to a special edition of Bloomberg Tech. We are live from CES in Las Vegas, where we've been tracking the biggest tech stories. Another great lineup of incredible guests today, but we've also got some news outside of CES, right, Ed?
Yeah, coming up first, China plans to approve some imports of Nvidia's H200 chips as soon as this quarter for select commercial use.
Plus AI valuations pushing ever higher. Anthropic raising a new round of funding that would value the company at $350 billion.
And we wrap this special CES edition today with guests from the robotics and augmented reality spaces, venture capital and the government.
First, we check in on these markets that are in a bit of sell-off mode. Look, anxiety ahead of those non-farm payrolls data that we get tomorrow. No one taking on any more risk after what has been a really rather nice run-up in tech stocks over the last 3 trading days. So today, maybe we sell the news. Today, we're off by some 0.6%, but all eyes really on one key player.
Yeah, like your chart is showing that actually, we'd be kind of lower, wiggling around throughout the early session. Nvidia has taken a significant leg lower this Thursday. It's now off 2%. The reporting is crystal clear from Bloomberg. According to sources, China's government will approve some Chinese tech companies taking H200s. The sources are giving details on which companies, but the crystal clear line is, has to be commercial use, cannot be military, cannot be some government, cannot be state-backed enterprise. Let's get out to Washington, D.C. and Bloomberg senior tech editor Mike Shepard. There's a lot of specifics in this reporting. Give us those specifics, what we know about the companies involved, and also the volumes, because that's going to matter to the stock.
Well, the volumes are a little bit unclear as far as what the Chinese government would approve, but we already are getting some signals, according to our reporting, that companies like ByteDance and Baidu would be interested in buying up to 200,000 Nvidia H200 chips each once those approvals go through. Now, it's unclear whether China, the authorities in Beijing, will allow those kinds of quantities right away into the market. And Ed, it's important to remember also that, look, there are restrictions still in place here from the U.S. Even with President Donald Trump's verbal blessing for this, we still need to see licenses emitted by the Commerce Department. That process is still underway. Jensen Huang, in your interview with him the other day, indicated that he was optimistic that those would go through. And likewise, this would affect AMD, which also has chips that it is hoping to get into China as well. Look, for Nvidia, this is a big win if it all goes through, as we are outlining in this report. China is the world's biggest semiconductor market, and Jensen Huang has identified it as a $50 billion opportunity for the company. And the timing is crucial. They are facing intensifying competition from rivals inside China, including Camericon and SMIC, which are making strides in the development of their own homegrown semiconductors. And we have also seen signals from authorities in Beijing that they would like local companies to start favoring domestic alternatives to Nvidia over whatever might be coming from the U.S.
Mike Shepard, as always, thank you so much from Washington. We're going to stick with the theme of AI. Of course we are. But this time we're going to look at it from a valuation perspective,
right,
Ed, because Anthropic, the latest news that it's out looking and raising some $10 billion. It's before that raise, valued therefore at $350 billion. We know OpenAI is out there also raising funds, could be as whopping as $750 billion. All of this as we eye potentially these companies coming to the public markets as well.
I've been speaking to some of the investors backing this round. $10 billion, $350 billion valuation. They don't have the scale that OpenAI has, right? But they've gone after the enterprise. And the way that one investor put it to me is there are 4 players right now: OpenAI, xAI, Anthropic, and Google. There's probably only room in the real world for 3. But it's interesting to see them continue raise.
And just how sophisticated they are when it comes to the coding side of the equation. That really seems to have been where they've made their mark. But also, they're trying to say that they are, well, the safer, more focused on ethics in some ways. They split off from OpenAI, to remember. That's what their origin story is.
And they, in your interview with him on Tenasia, getting a lot of credit for that coding piece as well. Another big story of the morning, and it's a jostling for position once again. We're looking at the market cap of Google, or Alphabet, the parent of Google, rising above Apple. What did I just say? In this world order, 4 players right now, Alphabet and Google, have really accelerated. in recent months, both literally from a stock performance perspective, but also just, I guess, by news flow and reputation. And Apple, it's a different game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one that I didn't see coming last year, or at least as you know, at any point in this AI race.
That TPU story just changed everything, didn't it? And the vertical integration.
Okay, coming up, humanoid robotics takes shape right here at CES. We're going to discuss the future of physical AI with Jan Lipphardt, founder and CEO of OpenMind. That's next. This is Bloomberg Tech. Here at CES, physical AI is breaking through to the mainstream, with humanoid robotics taking center stage. Joining us is Jan Lipphardt, founder and CEO of OpenMind, a startup building an operating system designed to connect, coordinate, and scale intelligence across all thinking machines. There are so many things to take away from being here this week. Let's, I think, focus on the humanoid robot form factor at least. But your main impression with those on display, I think Atlas is probably top of mind for many. Last night when I was here with Boston Dynamics CEO Robert Plater, the wait to go and see Atlas was 2 hours. What do you make of that?
Well, just a few years ago, the robots here were kind of janky. They were wobbly, and they had wires coming out of their head, and they looked like science experiments. And it's really fascinating to see just how quickly humanoids are turning into a real product. And Atlas is, of course, just one of those. So instead of them being science experiments, they look like real things that you might want to have in your home or in your workplace.
You're also a professor at Stanford, and you know the academic discussion here, which I've loved, it has been, hey guys, we think we've solved the software problem. Have we solved the software problem?
Well, when people talk about humanoids, everyone has a different picture of what the humanoid is going to do. If you're talking about a humanoid for a hospital, that's a totally different situation compared to a humanoid flipping hamburgers or teaching kids math. So it really depends on...
There comes a point where moving a box from one part of the table to the other part of the table is no longer impressive.
Yeah, that's completely solved, and Amazon has 1.1 million robots deployed already. So the logistics pick and place is effectively solved. One frontier is what you might call social robotics. So these are the robots that will live with you, and they will teach your kids, and they will help your parents. And that is still more difficult because there's a lot of what we expect when we interact with people, their ability to make us laugh and speak and be quick and so forth. That is still difficult, but basics like picking things up, that's solved.
When we think about the solution of integration, a lot of companies want to talk about how they're the vertically integrated company. They are making not just the hardware, but the software too. So where are you getting it in? How many of these 14 humanoids that we see here at CES are you putting your open software to work in?
Well, it's about half of them. And for many humanoid robotics companies, they have a traditional focus on hardware. And they're seeing the software move extremely quickly, and some of them have the sense that they don't have the inherent capability to also be at the frontier of the software, and that's where we're getting traction for us.
I want to go back to the very thesis of whether you want a humanoid at all. Boston Dynamics' perspective is, in the interim, before we have manufacturing units that are purpose-built for robots, a humanoid makes sense because it has to work side along humans and augment them, or at least replace them. Eventually, maybe that's not the form factor we want. I don't think I want a form factor of a humanoid in my home, to be perfectly frank. You're seeing a lot more of these sort of soft, cuddly toys for companionship and the way that they talk. What will robots look like in the future?
Well, I have a humanoid at home, and my kids... Casual. And my humanoid, my kids thinks that is totally normal. Because for them, they've seen that for literally 2 years now. And however, when I talked to my mom, I sent my mom some videos of the humanoids here.
What do you call your humanoid?
Iris.
Iris?
You built
Iris,
it yourself?
No, this is hardware developed by someone else. Of course, it's running the software I wrote,
right,
which is why I trust it, because I know exactly what's going on inside the humanoid. But yeah, I sent my mom some videos of the humanoids around here, and she said, Yanni, I'm shocked. This is awesome. So to your original point, what is the right form factor? What's special about a humanoid is that they're, by definition, compatible with your home, a hospital, school, workplace, door handles, light switches, stairs. So they can immediately be effective in all the infrastructure that humans have built for us.
This is why it's important to get as far as you can be an objective take on the state of industry, right? The problem, we started this segment by saying it's broken through to the mainstream. Actually, there is a lot of fatigue, just like there was with robotaxi. We've been saying it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. What I see is in the industrial use cases, it's there. But one thing that came up with us a lot this week, care of the elderly.
Yeah.
Are we really in a position where overnight humanoid robots are going to solve what is a massive addressable market?
Well, to some people, this sounds dystopian and creepy. You know, is it something you imagined that your parents would interact with robots? But some of the companies building robots for memory care facilities like Andromeda in San Francisco and Australia, the stories they tell are heartbreaking, where nurses now have to clean the head of the humanoid every evening because the patients will kiss the humanoid. So the nurses now have to remove lipstick off the head of the humanoid. And so for many people that are starved of human interaction, they get so attached to the humanoid and their eyes light up and they laugh and they will kiss the head of the humanoid. And so there's definitely something there. And for most people in retirement homes here in the U.S., they haven't been visited by their family members in a year or more. So it's a group of people that are really starved for any kind of interaction, and some of them really seem to love the technology.
I mean, Jan, that speaks to a greater problem in humanity writ large. I want your take, if I dare go back to OpenMind itself. Where do you make your money?
Well, we have a little bit of a different take on humanoids. We don't want them to be closed. We don't want them to be these magic boxes that show up at your front door. We think of them much more like cell phones that are open and where developers everywhere can add apps or skills that will allow your humanoids to do many more things very quickly. And so it's very important to us that this technology is not like this magic black box, but it's something that most of us understand, can engage with, and build for.
Yeah, great catching up with you. Thank you for spending some time.
Thank you so much.
Jan Lipphardt, founder, CEO of OpenMind. Sticking with robots, well, Ed got to sit down with the Boston Dynamics CEO, Robert Plater, to discuss the company's latest iteration of a humanoid robot, that's Atlas, designed to work in Hyundai's manufacturing plant starting in 2028, including a factory in Savannah, Georgia. Take a listen.
By 2028, Hyundai's going to build us a purpose-built factory designed for mass manufacture of our humanoids. And that's going to have a capacity of between 10 and 30,000 units per year. And so that's the goal. By 2030, we'll be building tens of thousands of robots per year.
I've always wanted to ask you, and I'm going to ask you, your analysis and impressions of Tesla's Optimus program and your assessment of what they're doing and what they've done.
Well, I think they're a very serious competitor. They've done a lot of very impressive work. They also have the advantages we have, that they have a consumer in Tesla to use those robots.
Internally.
Yeah, and I think it really requires both aspects. You need the technology from robotics and AI. You also need that customer and that consumer. And so automotive is a natural fit. And so I think Tesla is actually very well placed to succeed here as well.
That was Boston Dynamics CEO Robert Plater, and coming up here on the show next, Xreal revamps its AR glasses as the wearable space is seeing more competition. We speak with Xreal CEO Zhu. That's next. This is Bloomberg Tech. AI will bring a renaissance to the field of music. That's according to Grammy-winning AI artist Will I am. Also, the founder and CEO of FYI.ai. Bloomberg Tech's Tom McKenney sat down with him for this week's episode of Bloomberg Tech Europe, taking a deep dive into how AI is shaking up the music industry and the streaming business model. Listen to this.
It's a renaissance. The same way the Renaissance, catapulted, dimensionalized the creative industry in the past. The Renaissance, this new Renaissance, to do it for this era that we're in. So it's the age of the hyper creative.
Go to catch that episode of Bloomberg Tech Europe this Friday here on Bloomberg Television, 8:30 a.m. in London. That's 3:30 in the morning on you in the East Coast, but it's worth getting up for, trust me. Caro, what's up?
It is. Meanwhile, let's pivot to the world of smart eyewear, because we're talking with Xreal. They've just unveiled new entry-level AR glasses that come at a cheaper price point. Dubbed the 1S, the new glasses boast a 1200p resolution with a new price of $449. Xreal CEO Zhu is here with us now. Congratulations on the unveil, but we've got some news I want to hit first.
Sure.
You've been getting some financing, we understand.
Oh,
You're
yes.
raising money to be able to put out these new glasses at a cheaper price point.
I agree, yes. It's getting heated up for the whole race, right? And, it's getting exciting as well for the whole industry to really see glasses can really be the next computing platform. Paired with AI, I think at some point it can truly replace the cell phone we're using today.
Going back to the financing.
Yeah.
Raised about 100 million?
Yep.
Able to disclose what valuation? Who's backing you?
I would say at this moment it's mainly supply chain partners and some key vendors. At this moment there's not more information I can share, but definitely later.
But $100 million is accurate?
Yes.
I think there's a bit of an academic debate to be had here. I've used that phrase a lot, but is glasses the right form factor? The Razer CEO is actually on the program.
Okay.
Talking about how headphones might be the better form factor in an AI world. You have options in the wearables category.
Yep.
Is he right, wrong?
Well, okay, so I just met him actually a couple of days ago. We talk about this one.
Argument?
We talk a little bit about that, but for me, from my perspective, I do think glasses is the ultimate kind of form factor. When we see how we actually evolve going from the big screen to your laptop, to your cell phone, the screen is getting closer and closer. And what is even closer than your cell phone? It's probably going to be this display right in front of your eyes, right? And also, in my opinion, with a combination of AI, you can actually have an AI assistant stay in your eye, see what you see, feel and hear what you hear 24/7. If that is actually available, I do believe, there's no other advantage you can compete with the glasses.
Meta's going to step further right and now put the display in. Worries you? Doesn't worry you?
No. I think, it's a great competition. Meta definitely have a lot of advantages. They have a lot of investment, great talent, and they start really, really early, right? But still, I think this is big enough market. And still, I don't really see the form factor kind of converge. So this is open race for everybody. I'm just excited, to be part of that journey.
Well, the people we're waiting for the unveil from is Google. Yes. How are you working alongside Google? How is your relationship deepening? How is Project Aura?
Okay, that's a great question. This week we just, announced that we're deepening the partnership with multi-year extension and also named Xreal being the lead hardware partner with Google on Android XR. And this is really great, exciting moments. I think maybe it's not just one company going to do everything, together. Maybe it's kind of combination, the hardware and software collaboration at some point. And Xreal, we are really good at building optical modules, building chips, and Google, they're really good at building AI, building an operating system. So I think, this is a win-win situation for us to team up together to kind of polish the end-to-end hardware and software ecosystem experiences together.
So do you think it'll almost be like a cell phone world in that you have the Google Pixel, but you also have Samsung with the Android operating system and a myriad of others using Android? So is it going to be Google with their own hardware and their own... And then, or you're going to be the hardware partner of choice and then be some others out there?
Absolutely. If you remember early on, actually, Google partnered with HTC. At the very beginning to define the whole smartphone industry, part of it, alongside with Apple. And then they start to rolling out to LG, to Samsung, and then they have their own Pixels, right? So it's going to be an ecosystem play. We're just, we just feel lucky. We got picked by Google, so we can work together being the pioneer to drive this industry forward.
When Project Aura glasses come to the real world?
26. It's going to be this year.
What does the rollout look like?
Well, that's something I cannot share at this moment.
But you will go to market. You'll say they're ready. This is what they look like. This is what they cost. And it'll be available.
Of course, when the time is ready, we'll release those kind of information.
There are some other things that you're battling with your latest generation existing Xreal glasses, right?
Absolutely.
Sleeker, lower price. Price is so important, but you are going up against a market where we have Vision Pro and other similar products, and then we question immersion and field of view.
That's right.
What's your response to those questions?
People start to think about, maybe for Apple Vision Pro, it is great experience, but the question and challenge is, it is too expensive, it is too heavy, right? So how can we come up with something, lighter, more affordable, but we can deliver 80% of that kind of experience, and that's where Xreal glass is coming about. And especially if you look at the latest generation 1S, right, we further kind of bump up the features. Some of the very unique feature we say is 2D to 3D lifetime conversion. We're using our own chip to do this AI conversion in the real time. And it's amazing. Any kind of content coming with the glasses, whether it's a cell phone, handheld gaming devices, your laptop, it can turn into 3D in the real time.
Let's talk about how you've got the price point down.
Yes.
Is it because you're making your own chip? Is it a supply chain navigation, or are you just taking a hit from a profit margin perspective?
No, we just, we spend a lot of effort optimizing this whole supply chain. Better yield rate, higher volume, all it's kind of going to help to bring the cost down.
Is it coming from China?
Part of that, yes.
And is that a risk, an issue, given the national security concerns here in the United States?
That's a great question. We do have this kind of global supply chain strategy as well. It can be China, it can be other part of it can be even in the US in some day.
Just very, very quickly,
yes.
This CES, you've had a lot of foot traffic.
Yes.
Just reflect on that really quick.
Well, people like glasses, and they like to experience. Actually, even though we've been talking about glasses for so long, there's still a lot of people that haven't really tried on any glasses. So I think this is still a long kind of education process.
Xreal CEO, Chi Zhu, great to have you back on Bloomberg Tech here at CES. Thank you so much. Now, coming up, we're going to speak with Jacob Helberg, US State Department Undersecretary for Economic Affairs, to discuss the state of chip export curbs. The sources say China is now ready to approve imports of some Nvidia H200 chips. The big story from Bloomberg this Thursday. It is halftime. We are in Las Vegas. This is CES, and this is Bloomberg Tech. Welcome back to Bloomberg Tech. There is a lot of news that's driving markets, irrespective of what's going on here in Las Vegas. One of them is the Warner Brothers Discovery situation. Paramount Skydance came out with a statement reaffirming their $30 a share offer. But interesting, Caro, in the calculus, they're now saying that the cable networks that they want to include in the deal are worth $0, which is interesting because a lot of the street and a lot of the market is saying, we don't think you're quite right on that. Remember, Netflix wants to buy just the studios and streaming, spin out the legacy networks and cable offering, whereas Paramount Skydance, as we say on Bloomberg Tech, want the whole enchilada. Either way, we're still kind of in a holding pattern until we move forward. There's a really big story overnight out of Korea, and that is Samsung. Quarterly profit tripled because memory. We've been talking so much about the supply constraint and bottleneck that is memory right now, and pricing goes up. But if you're a memory maker and pricing goes up to that extent, it's usually pretty good for your bottom line. The stock down about a percentage point, but that was the big headline. And it has been such a focus this week, the issue and bottleneck that is memory chips. Not just in the data center context, but of course PC as well.
And of course, because Jensen Huang made that point, and SanDisk, the shares went wild. Maybe that's why we're pulling back a little bit on Samsung. But let's switch gears a little bit, because another key part of our conversation that we had yesterday with Anduril founder Palmer Luckey was where we discussed US competition with China. And Ed, you first asked him about the compensation package after President Trump called for capping executive pay with defense contractors in particular. Just take a listen.
One of the provisions that the president proposes is a salary cap of $5 million.
Yep.
In the Bloomberg story, it outlined some of the comp of those CEOs.
Right.
Would you be willing to say what you pay yourself at Anduril, and if you would abide by
I pay myself $100,000 a year. So
significantly less than a $5 million cap.
True, but I also own a lot of my company, and this measure is not really written in a way where it's intended to hit new companies starting new things. Act like if Kelly Johnson were alive today and he owned a bunch of Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman or Raytheon, I don't think that anyone would have nearly much of a problem with him. But yeah, I pay myself $100,000 a year. That's my compensation package. I own a bunch of Anduril because I started the company. So my motivation is to try and build it the biggest thing possible. I will say, people have fairly critiqued me and said, but Palmer, are you really a neutral party here? Are you really in a position to comment, given you're competing with these companies? And I'd say two things. One, these measures do apply in equal measure to me. I now cannot pay dividends. I now cannot do stock buybacks if I'm not investing in new plants, if I'm not doing these new things. The other thing is, it's always tricky when you want to, I'm in defense because I wanted to help solve these problems, right? It's actually the same thing with like Mod Retro in the gaming space. Like, oh, of course Palmer would criticize these other game companies. After all, he's in the gaming space. It's like, but I'm in the gaming space because I want to solve these problems. It's kind of this like catch-22. Like if you're outside of it, they'll say, well, why don't you do something about it then? And you do something like, who cares what you're doing? You're just part of the problem. It's always been emotionally difficult for me.
When we're thinking about where you stand, where US stands versus China.
Yep.
Where does it in terms of drone technology? We're in this context of a geopolitical strain that started this year off with Venezuela. We look now to Russia. How do you see China and the Taiwan question?
China has an incredibly strong drone industry. It is largely a result of state intervention. It's largely a result of industrial policy, of supply chain investments that the government has made, and even trade deals that China has made around the world to allow for these drones to freely flow out in other marketplaces. China has the best drone industry in the world. It's not even close. It's definitely a weakness that the United States has. Now, you saw recently this ban on DJI drones.
Yes.
The intention there is to try and fix that. You can fix these things. The U.S. is capable of building drones. It's just we aren't capable of competing with the labor laws, emissions laws, energy prices from coal plants, etc., that you see in China. So I'm hoping that this ban on DJI drones results in a strong U.S. drone market popping up to take its place over the next 1, 2, 3 years. Anduril actually is a drone that we were showing off in Japan recently that's made with 100% Japanese parts. Japan is another nation that can build their own drones. They don't need DJI, but it's hard for that to make economic sense when China is allowed to flood the market.
That was Anduril founder Palmer Luckey. For more on the U.S. relationship with China and the national security concerns behind semiconductors, we're joined by Jacob Helberg, U.S. State Department Undersecretary for Economic Affairs, but also the founder of the Hill and Valley Forum, which we were able to attend last year. There was something in the China context which we didn't get to with Palmer, which was a piece of recent news with President Xi reiterating, I would say, a long-stated goal of reunification with Taiwan. Now, the reason I want to start there, Jacob, is in your efforts with Pax Silica, the scenario that everyone is trying to plan for, Taiwan and access to capacity in the semiconductor side being shut off, if that scenario were to unfold. Starting 2026, could you just bring us your latest thinking on that, please?
Absolutely. And it's great to join you guys here at CES in Las Vegas, which is such a great window into American innovation and innovation from a lot of Pax Silica countries like South Korea and Japan. It's incredibly exciting that we're talking barely 3 weeks after the signing of this landmark declaration. Ultimately, let me put into context why this is so important and why so many people are talking about technology competition. Today, it's clear that if the 20th century ran on steel, the 21st century is increasingly running on silicon and compute. And we're already seeing in the United States a third of our GDP growth coming from AI, and growth picking up and accelerating as productivity is starting to accelerate growth in sectors across the economy. So back in July, President Trump rolled out this landmark speech at an event I co-hosted with White House AI czar David Sachs called Winning the AI Race, where it was a landmark moment where he declared that the U.S. is set to win the AI race and that it is the official policy of the U.S. government to do whatever it takes. A few months later, I'm happy to report that at the State Department, we have adopted a strategy that breaks down this broad goal into 3 parts. We want to help the U.S. government win the AI race by leading in innovation, by gaining market share, and by securing our supply chains. So we launched Pax Silica with a group of 7 countries, and they are the most technologically advanced countries, including Japan, South Korea, which is home to Samsung, SK Hynix, Mitsubishi. And we are engaged in a lot of intensive talks to now transition to the implementation phase of Pax Silica in 2026.
A lot of your anxiety, and you've been at this for a very long time, trying to warn the United States and those in positions of power, and now in the power that you have yourself, that we shouldn't be exposed to China in the way that we have been. Now, from a national security perspective, what do you think of the latest that maybe H200s go into China? That by this quarter, they might sign off for Alibaba, for BYD to be able to access Nvidia's chips?
So part of the goal of winning the supply chain means we need to expand market share. And sometimes there's a bit of a tension between innovation and diffusion. Because when you diffuse technology, sometimes you're compromising a little bit on innovation because more people have access to that technology, which narrows your technological edge. Part of what we're doing by exporting our H200s is making sure that the world's developers are building on top of the American stack, and we want to ensure that American models actually stay ahead through these strategic bilateral deals in countries in the Gulf, like the UAE, the Saudi Arabia, and a number of others that are on the way but still too early to disclose here today, in order to make sure that our companies have by far the most compute capacity so that our LLMs stay ahead as well.
Jacob, on that market share bucket, the concern that many in DC outlined to us is if we don't export to the Gulf, China will. Is that the right way to think about it for America?
I think it's an opportunity. Where there is nature abhors a vacuum. We have got to fill the vacuum while we can. We have the world's best technology, and the world knows that. And ultimately, America has thrived when we allow our innovators to actually dominate market share.
They did dominate. Nvidia had 95% of the market, and now Jensen would say he has 0, and maybe he's being allowed to claw some back. Has not the horse bolted? Have we not already allowed Cambricon to grow and Huawei to grow? Are we really going to be able to clean back and have the stack of our own worldwide?
And that's exactly why we launched Pax Silica, to make sure that we have a sensible approach to exporting our best technologies while protecting our most sensitive technologies. We're having dual-track conversations with our partners. We want to protect our sensitive technologies, but we have got to have a path to gain market share. And I think everyone's on the same page. Everyone who joined Pax Silica understands that the world's supply chains being concentrated in one country, no matter how you feel about that country, is too risky, is too brittle, and is ultimately a liability to the global economy. And that's why we started this economic security coalition with the world's most advanced technology companies and countries in order to make sure that we diversify those supply chains.
Jacob, those companies are here at CES Las Vegas. What do you hope to achieve in the time that you have at CES?
So part of what we're looking for our roadmap in 2026 is we want to focus on policy coordination, we want to expand membership of Pax Silica, and we want to focus on infrastructure projects. The way that we view infrastructure is we want to focus on the arteries of supply chains through advanced logistics. We want to focus on the muscle might of industrial capacity, particularly with fabs, factories, and refineries. And we also want to focus on the fuel, particularly capital and energy. One of the things that's so interesting about talking with companies here is we can get to actually stress test a lot of these ideas with builders and with people who are the closest to these problems day to day.
Jacob, this week has been extraordinary from a geopolitical perspective. And I want to just get your thoughts, high level. Your view on Pax Silica is that it's sort of peace through power. Is that how we should be interpreting what's occurred Venezuela, with Russian ships, with what continues to occur worldwide right now?
So I think at the end of the day, one of the takeaways of the events the last few weeks is very clear that the world needs to know that the Trump administration says what it means and means what it says. I think Secretary Rubio spoke very eloquently about where the U.S. stands and the Trump administration stands on Venezuela and other issues that have been in the news like Greenland. Ultimately, the biggest threat to international norms is the Western Hemisphere and the United States being asleep at the switch while we are encroached from the north through the Arctic and from the south through Latin America. Ultimately, Pax Silica is an effort to pursue a very pragmatic approach by working with our closest technological partners to actually forge strategic investment deals and allow moving the needle in a way that actually benefits all of us. That is why this coalition is so diverse. It's very, very new. It's a completely new grouping of countries that includes players like Singapore, like Israel, the UAE, people who aren't used to being included in traditional legacy forums like the G20 and the G7. And yet these countries punch far above their weight, and we're very proud to partner with them.
Jacob, it's great having some time with you. I'm excited to be on stage with you a little bit later as well. Jacob Helberg is U.S. Department of State Undersecretary for Economic Affairs and, of course, founder of the Helen Valley Forum, which is bringing together a VC and Washington surrounding the China issues. Meanwhile, coming up, more on the future of AI as companies shift in and out of the digital world and back into physical. Steve Zhang, Kindred Ventures Managing Partner, joins us next. This is Bloomberg Tech. AI's real-world impact is dominating the conversation here at CES, with investors watching closely to see which technologies move from hype to reality, and maybe they foster that reality. Steve Zhang's with us, managing partner and founder of Kindred Ventures, early-stage venture firm known for backing category-defining startups, making significant bets on what we think of the work that you did with Uber, but we think of so many of the companies that have had significant exits and M&A that's happening. But for you here, I think one of the stars of the show has been Neuro, right? We saw this big announcement coming from, we had Lucid on the show, but Uber and indeed Neuro teaming up to provide the future of robo-taxis. But it's a crowded field. How did you decide Neuro was going to be helping win in that autonomous fight?
Sure. So if you rewind time and you look at the history of Uber, you'll remember 10 years ago, Uber had announced that they were going to invest in self-driving car technology. Now, a lot of things happened since then. They originally had planned it with Travis Kalanick at the helm of the company, and then had to jettison that whole business before going public under Dara. And I think what Dara did is pick that back up and say, we need to accelerate our strategy. So about 2 years ago, a lot of those plans were put into motion. And what was interesting was Neuro was a company that had been one of the few companies like Waymo that had been training around Bay Area streets with their LiDAR and their cameras. And they recently launched a autonomy intelligence platform, which is basically an operating system to allow any third-party automaker to have self-driving capabilities. And so what you saw here was a great launch between Neuro, Lucid, and Uber to not only retrofit a Lucid car with autonomy, full level 4, not 8S, right? Not level 2++ assistance, but full self-driving capability like Waymo and Tesla FSD, and launch that with Lucid on the Uber network. So you'll be able to open up your Uber app at the end of this year in the Bay Area and be able to take a self-driving car.
It's like capital light model.
Yes.
Let someone else take on the burden of the hardware and the stack, just do the fleet management. But for me, the bigger piece of news in that world was Alpamayo. Right? Because Nvidia's coming with the same thing, saying, hey, we have a full stack solution. Yeah. I know that you caught notice of that.
So AGX Thor, which is inside of Neuro, is part of that.
Inside the inference
right.
part, right.
And so what Nvidia is doing, and it's very smart of Nvidia, they are selling chips, right? And so what they want to do is sell you a starter kit. They want to give you an open source model. They want to give you open data sets, and they say, go to town. We want you to build a self-driving car platform to fit these cars, to fit your ride-sharing or delivery network, your logistics network. And what they're saying is, we want to have many competitors out there so we can sell you more GPUs. And so Neuro is actually one of the very first partners that's been using that for years now. Nvidia is an investor in Neuro. And so, Neuro and Uber are sort of the prime example and hopefully a flagship for them in their business. But, Nvidia on a larger scale at this show is what they're doing is they're king-making. They're king-making an entire sector. They're saying, a year ago they were talking about robotics. This year they've transitioned that into physical AI. Now they're not just talking about robotics, they're talking about autonomy and mobility because it's coming to a crescendo. And so they're very, very smart in saying, we're sort of like the Fed, right? We're the Fed for AI. We're gonna tell you.
That's the headline, right?
Yeah. And we're gonna tell you where everyone's gonna go. You may be on that wave, you may not be on that wave, but you should be. And by the way, we have the models, we have the data, and we have the chips, and overall compute for you to go build that. And so, you know, I think there's been a lot of argument about, you know, is Nvidia's kingdom, right, at risk right now? And I would say that they continue to surprise and be several years ahead of their competition. So we're very excited, but we're watching closely.
I mean, look, you were known for backing Uber, and then ultimately there were two key winners out of that, Uber and Lyft. When I think about the areas that you're also thinking of, I mean, how many players can there be in autonomous? How many players can there be in foundational models? You're in perplexity, and everyone's thinking maybe there's only an Anthropic and an OpenAI and a Gemini space.
Sure. As you're rightfully noting, any innovation curve starts with many competitors, and it whittles down to 2 or 3. It's just it's a rule of thumb in Silicon Valley. So right now, Neuro is entering the space. There's Waymo, there's Tesla, and there's Neuro. In China, there's several other competitors, right? In Europe, there are none, right? And so on level 4 capability. So what I think is happening is you're seeing a whittling down because of the resources, the training data, the amount of years that you need to do to train across all these streets. It's not a software company that you can just start up out of scratch. So I think one of the things that you'll see also in robotics is you'll see this whittling down of competition. And you see Boston Dynamics, which is owned by Hyundai, which is very interesting. They're doing quite well, and they revealed a humanoid. You know, I've been very careful and skeptical about the development of humanoids, and I would say that this is the first time I've seen humanoids in action that look practical. And so I think you'll see that in robotics as well. I think you'll see that in generative media. I think you'll see that in agents. So a lot of these platforms will start to whittle down to 2, 3, maybe 4 players. And this year will be the year of that, which is why inference, you know, one of the other things that we're seeing here is that further evidence that inference is going to exceed training in terms of compute. And that flippening, if you will, right, if I can use a Bitcoin term, that flippening means a lot. So demand for compute is far exceeding supply. Even with the HBM shortage, it's going to increase that. So there's a battle royale happening here in compute.
Steve Zhang, Kindred Ventures, hitting literally the biggest stories of the week that we've had here out of CES, and we have much more to come. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg Tech. The story in markets right now is tech is down. Nvidia off by 0.8%, had been much lower. Over the course of the week, we've kind of not had any of the euphoria we expected. We all came to Las Vegas thinking that Nvidia, who in Steve Zhang's words was the kingmaker of AI, the Fed of AI, would tell us something profound that would keep the stock going higher, and it's not really panned out that way.
Even though we kind of did, said, look, that $500 billion of inbound I see in revenue in 2026, that's going to be higher. Maybe we even get H200s into China, and yet so high expectations. Look, AMD, what more could Lisa Su do? She made up a term, was it Yotto flop? She talked about the sheer scale of compute that's still necessary, the winning formula that she's seeing, and stock is down. Qualcomm, though, really managed to impress the markets.
But also,
on robotics
it put
and on
itself
cars.
into the market that everyone was already talking about. You know, so you see the chip makers say, okay, the next phase is physical AI. We did learn some hard lessons that it's difficult out there. Memory is a big story. And then there's robots, right? It is the Consumer Electronics Show, and there were real robots to see.
And what do we hear? 14 different humanoids, not to mention the furry friends that we're seeing around here that are going to be a companion to your child or to the elderly. It's been extraordinary to be here on the floor of CES. And you see the level of innovation, stuff that will stick, stuff that definitely won't. I still haven't tried that lollipop that plays music as you eat it there.
Yeah, and we got some deals, we got some M&A, we got some fundraising, but it is the best way to start the year.
It is. I mean, boy, still talking about those valuations, Anthropic as well. That's it for this edition of Bloomberg Tech. But don't forget, later today, an exclusive interview is coming with the co-founder and COO of Minimax. That's right here from CES to discuss the Hong Kong listing. China IPO market for all things AI is on fire.
IPO 2026, looking good. Recap on the pod. You know where to find it. For the final time from Las Vegas, this is Bloomberg Tech.